Music to the noise, yeah, the mess we make. Machine Pun Kelly get caught in the fake. Facts and logic with a twist of jest. Strip it down to truth, yeah, forget the rest. Humor propose the lies right out of the park. Look beyond the shadows that set the dark. Sparks of laughter fire up the night, bringing clarity where they blur the fight. Cut through the chaos, yeah, the tangled lies. Machine Pun Kelly with a set of clear eyes. Truths and jokes gonna rock this show. Step into light where the real facts glow.
Hey there, I am Machine Pun Kelly, aka MPK. Thanks for joining. Got a new little feature established. I'm putting on here starting today. We're going to see how this goes, where all the comments will appear in real time from wherever you're watching. Currently, I stream to X, YouTube, and Facebook. So anyway, allegedly, if this works the way it is supposed to, wherever you comment from, it will be there for everybody to see. So feel free. Today, I want to talk about a couple of things. I want to talk about the shutdown, and I want to talk about the like the political violence rhetoric that's been coming out. But before I get into that, I just want to talk about like this really briefly on all these prosecutions, and just something I keep hearing the commentators say is that like malicious prosecution is really hard to prove, and rarely works. And I just cannot think if it has ever applied to any case at all, it should apply here. Like, I don't get why they're qualifying this. It's so obviously malicious prosecution. Like if you haven't heard Letitia James, her case, apparently the prosecutor, the previous prosecutor is saying that it would have made a difference of, like, first of all, whether she's, like guilty or not is highly questionable. But even if she is guilty, she saved $15 a month. So I don't know. I don't think that warrants a literal federal prosecution. It's like we don't have to make a federal case about it. Like, no, we actually, in this case, they are literally making a federal case out of it, out of $15 a month, and on very specious charges anyway. So, that's just, as ridiculousness goes, this is peak ridiculousness. But I do have some more charts for you today, and I do have some more substance that I wanted to talk about. I think, one of the reasons when I started doing this show is I want to get into details. I think that we too often gloss over things and just reduce them down to talking points, and I got tired of that. And some things are just not easy to digest in a 3-minute segment on the news. So one of the things I wanted to talk about is the shutdown. So I'm going to share with you my screen, and I'm going to share this little dashboard. Whoops, did I share the wrong one? Okay, that's the other one. So hang on. Okay. Let me try this again. Once again, I am just highly professional here. Okay, so let's talk about the shutdown. So whose fault is it? What is it actually over? What is the results? So we're going to go into all of these details, and I'll read through some of the key quotes from different people with you, and we'll just dive into this and really understand what's going on. The federal government shut down on October 1st, 2025, and has remained closed for over 3 weeks. It is now the second longest shutdown in U.S. history, and the longest shutdown in U.S. history also came under Trump. So Trump is very good at shutting down the government. At the center of the dispute, enhanced ACA premium subsidies that help 24 million Americans afford health insurance. What the Democrats want is they just want to extend the subsidies now, reverse the Medicaid cuts, and protect open enrollment on November 1st. What Republicans want is what they call a clean funding bill first, and then to negotiate subsidies later. Some want subsidies to expire. And this is really at the heart of it, is they're saying, the Republicans are saying, oh, well, we can just negotiate that later. We can negotiate the ACA subsidies later. And, like we can kick the ball down to November 21st. And it's like, if you're not going to negotiate, so the Democrats are, if you're not going to negotiate now, why should we take your word for it that you're going to negotiate on November 21st? The other thing is that on November 1st, that's when the insurance companies send out their premiums for 2021, or for 2026. And those go out November 1st. So if you don't know what the premiums are going to be for until November 21st, it makes it really hard to do that. And they'll probably end up just having to send out the ones that assume there are no subsidies, and that's going to turn a lot of people away, because the rates are supposed to go up like 114%. So while all of this is going on, and we'll get into what the Republicans are saying and all that in a bit. But while all of this is going on, there's 500,000 federal workers missing paychecks. And the average premium increase for people that are on the ACA is going to be 114%. There are 24 million people currently on the ACA, and 78% of Americans actually support extension. So overwhelmingly, even, if you figure it's half and half political divide, that means half of the Republicans are supporting extending the ACA. And that's because it's not just Democrats that are on the ACA. There are some Republicans that probably are on the ACA and they don't know it. I once had this argument on Facebook for days where this guy was saying that he doesn't have to worry about Obamacare because he's got ACA. I mean, the Republicans have done such a magnificent job of distorting reality to their entire population that they have no idea what things actually mean anymore. So let's dive into first let's go to what each side actually wants and what they say the other side wants and blah, blah, blah. So what the Democrats' position is, they want to extend the ACA subsidies. I think that's pretty clear. They want to reverse Medicaids from the one big beautiful bill. They want action before the November 1st open enrollment, because what happens if you wait until after November 1st and you still extend the ACA? You're going to have a lot of people that aren't going to know about it, that aren't going to hear about it. You're going to have people lose their health insurance just out of frustration. There's going to be people that open up their estimated cost and are going to go into like a special kind of sticker shock. Because when I say 114%, I mean it's an increase of 114%. I don't mean it's 114% compared to what it is now. So it's not like the difference between $100 and $114. It's the difference between $100 and $214. So that's a lot of money. And that, who's paying $100? Like nobody. And I would, like one other thing I want to clarify here is why the ACA exists is back before the ACA, there was an issue where there were people that made too much money to qualify for Medicaid, and not enough money to actually afford individual insurance. So these are people that are self-employed and who don't get government or don't get employee insurance as a result. And the rates for that are actually much higher than for employee insurance. And it's also, depending on your situation, could be like way higher because there was this whole thing about uh, uh, prior condition, previous pre-existing conditions. That's the word I'm looking for. So if you had a pre-existing condition, then you could either pay a lot more for your insurance or just not even get it at all. And it's like the more extreme the pre-existing condition was, the higher chance that you weren't going to be able to afford it or get it at all were. And like, just for an example, these aren't like always extreme pre-existing conditions. I had in 2005 like a couple of months where I was just depressed for some reason. So I went and I got counseling, and they gave me an antidepressant that I was on for 2 months. My whole life I've been on antidepressants for 2 months. But because I had been on antidepressants for 2 months, my insurance skyrocketed. I was self-employed, I was a minister, and my insurance went up like $500 a month in 2005. Like that's like $1,000 now, or I don't know what it is. So whatever, you can do the math or check on Google, whatever that is. I don't know how, what it's comparable to, but in 2005, $500 was a lot more than it is now. And when you're with employee-based insurance, then that kind of all just gets thrown together. Everybody gets thrown together into one big beautiful pool. And so you end up paying less per person. And that doesn't happen with individual insurance. And so what the ACA did is pull everybody together like they're their own little employment pool. And so then that lowers the cost of ACA or of health insurance for people that are self-employed. And because of that, it lowers the cost, and then there's still people that are not going to quite have enough money to afford it. And so what that does is it has this assistance for people that make too much money to qualify for Medicaid, but not enough money to afford it themselves. And based on how much you make relative to the poverty level, you get a staggered assistance. And that staggered assistance is what's at stake right now. So without that staggered assistance, people that are getting it suddenly are not going to be able to afford insurance anymore. Like they can afford a certain amount of money, but they can't afford the full amount of money. That's the whole point of ACA. Is to fill that gap. So what the Democrats want to do is they want to extend these subsidies. The Republicans have always hated ACA. I don't even know why they hate it so much other than Obama, wanted it. It's just out of spite. And even now, like I was saying, it's like 70, what was it? What was it? 78% approval rating. And, they still don't want it. And that's because a big chunk of that 78% are the people that are on ACA are Republicans. I think it's like 55% of the people that are getting ACA are Republican, are in Republican states anyway. So that's what the Democrats want. They want to have this ACA extended. They want to have the Medicaid's cut from the one big beautiful bill, and they want to restore coverage for lawfully present immigrants, which kind of actually overlaps with this Medicaid cuts to some degree. But what that's about, there's a wait, I think I actually, yeah, I'll get into that in a minute. But what they want to do is they want to restore lawfully present coverage for lawfully present immigrants. And we'll get into that in a minute, what the Republicans are lying about and what the Democrats actually want. So the why are the Democrats wanting this now? Because open enrollment starts on November 1st, and that could affect what premiums people are seeing and whether or not they extend. And this is there's also a leverage argument. Like the Republicans are saying, why can't we just pass this clean bill and then come back to cover to talk about the health insurance later? And the reason is there's no guarantee that they're ever going to negotiate honestly on the health insurance bill. While the rates won't go into effect until January 1st, it's still going to like completely wreck everything by waiting. It's not like you can just on a dime, you know, like on December 31st, you can't just say, oh, it's open enrollment until tomorrow. So people are going to lose coverage. And so anyway, the Republicans want to pass a clean funding bill, which is a real, like the word clean is really to me, what they want to do is they just want to have their way. Let's just extend the bill and not discuss things. Negotiate subsidies separately later, which what negotiate means is really specious. And even if it's a standalone bill that finally gets passed, Donald Trump can still veto it. And you know how much he loves the ACA. So it's like the only way the Democrats are actually going to get something through is to negotiate this now. And you can say, well, why don't they just at December or on November 21st? Because we're just asking for an extension to November 21st. Well, if the Republicans aren't going to negotiate now, why should the Democrats going to believe they're going to negotiate on December 21st? And they're saying that there has to be dramatic changes to the ACA if extensions happen, but they won't say what those changes are. They're just, you know, it's like Donald Trump's healthcare plan has always been 2 weeks away. It's always, they never offer. There has not been a single alternative to the ACA ever offered by any Republican. All it is just, oh, we'll come up with something. Well, okay, come back and negotiate when you have something to negotiate. But right now, your negotiation is millions of people are going to lose their health care. That's not a negotiation. And the way I look at it, I keep looking at it as in this, you know, if you've ever seen Sophie's Choice, spoiler alert, but you know, you've had a few decades to watch it. So at the end of Sophie's Choice, the Sophie's Choice is she's got her two kids there, and you know, they're in Nazi Germany, and the Nazi tells her she has to choose which kid she can take home and which kid gets to go to a concentration camp. And so she cries and cries and cries, and you know, obviously, and has to make a choice. And I look at it, this is what the Republicans are doing to the Democrats right now. The Republicans are the Nazis, the Democrats are Sophie, and the children are either health care for millions of Americans or jobs for thousands of federal workers, paychecks for the military, and SNAP benefits for the poor. All right, you can't blame Sophie for making the choice. You blame the Nazis for forcing her to make one. And in this analogy, the Republicans are 100% the Nazis. They're the ones forcing the choice. They're the ones refusing to negotiate. So there's a big misrepresentation on the Democrats, on the Republican side, is that Democrats want to give health care to illegal immigrants. The reality is the subsidies are for legal immigrant or for legal residents. And what it is there are some people that are here legally that are here for humanitarian reasons. You know, this includes people like refugees, asylum seekers, asylees, uh, people like that they are here legally with the permission of the government, and they are working. They're working American, or they're working people in America who pay taxes. They're not freeloading illegal immigrants who are stealing your jobs or whatever. But that's what the Republicans are trying to frame it as. What happened is those people were getting subsidized in the ACA, and so they're also paying taxes, and they're working because you can't get to the ACA if you don't have a job and a certain level of income. You have to like make money in order to qualify for the ACA. This is stuff the Republicans don't want to talk about. They want to make it sound like everybody that's losing their health care is either some, 25-year-old kid sitting in his mom's basement playing video games and collecting Medicaid. However you do that. Like, Medicaid isn't a payment that goes to your house. Medicaid is the payment that goes to your doctor. So if you don't go to the doctor, then you don't get Medicaid. You just qualified for it. And if you're not working, you can't get the ACA. That's the Republican lying framing of it is that illegal immigrants are getting ACA or legal immigrants are getting Medicaid. Neither of those things is remotely true. And there is some confusion over, like the whole, whether so there's Reagan signed into law that if anybody shows up in an emergency room and needs life-saving care, you have to provide that care. You can't turn people away because they don't have insurance. And the reason that law was passed is people were literally dying because they were turned away because they didn't have insurance. And so now you can't do that legally. Now, in some states where they've expanded Medicaid, the federal government reimburses 90% of that money to the hospital that it costs to, take care of them. And in some states where they haven't expanded Medicaid, the federal government only expands like 40%, reimburses like 40%. The thing is, it's either 40% or 50%. I can't remember if the difference is 50% or the difference is 40%. But anyway, let's say it's 50%. So that money that goes to reimbursing all people, not just illegal immigrants, but all people who don't have insurance and receive medical care to save their life, or that all of that comprises like 0.4% of all funding for Medicaid. So that is not even a drop in the bucket compared to how much they're slashing it by. But Republicans want to just blame everything on, like illegal immigrants. And so, and they just, feed that like, they're filling the pig's trough for the maggots to come and devour. So that's just, like the false framing from the Republicans. The Democrat side is just that the Republicans are trying to call this political framing and or political theater and all of that kind of stuff. And I don't know if that's dishonest at all, but The Republicans are the ones making this political theater. So who's affected? Let me just check real quick here and see if I've got any. No comments yet. Okay. So there's 24 million people in the ACA right now. 22 million of those will lose their subsidies if they don't extend them. And that means at least 3.8 million will likely lose their insurance entirely. The increase is 114%. If you're paying $888 a year, that's going to bump up to $1,904 a year. And again, I want to remind you, this is why it's subsidized. Because people can't afford $1,900. Wait, 880. I think this should be a month. I think this was a mistake that Claude made in the graphic, because nobody's paying $888 a year. No, this is a month. For a family of four, it'd go from $888 a month to $1,904 a month. And right now there's 500,000 federal workers. So this is the one kid, this is the other kid. Democrats are Sophie and Republicans are the Nazis, forcing them to choose between people losing their health care and federal workers losing their paychecks. Okay, yeah, so this is more accurate. So if you're a 60-year-old couple making $85,000 a year, your premiums would be $22,000 a year, about a quarter of your paycheck, actually more than a quarter of your paycheck. If you're a family of four with $44,500 income, you're currently paying $0 a month. You would have them be paying $134 a month. If you're a family of four, you don't have an extra $134 a month. If you're a family of four making $45K, you do not have $134 extra dollars a month just floating around. If you're an individual with $28,000 of income, you currently pay about 1% of your income, and that would go up to 6% of your income. You don't have extra money if you're making $28,000 a year. That's like $2,000 a month after taxes. Not even that. And you're probably barely even paying rent. You probably have to have a roommate. Like, that's nothing. So this is really a massive difference for these people that are on AACA. By the way, I'm one of them. And I don't know how I'm going to have insurance if I lose it. All right, so let's look at the timeline. So on October 1st, the government was shut down. And now on October 15th, open enrollment already started in Idaho. National, then on November 1st, this is why November 1st is such a critical date. 24 million people will see their 2026 premiums. If subsidies aren't extended, they'll see massive increases and may not return. That's massive. Like 114% is a lot of money. And so the next funding deadline is November 21st. So the Republicans are saying, why can't we just kick this can down the road? And the Democrats are saying, if you kick the can down the road now, what makes us believe you're not going to kick it again? And the other part of that is insurance companies have they can't just change things on a dime. No pun intended. They have, and from what I understand, they have a plan for if it's subsidized and a plan for if it's not. But there's these negotiations with massive changes that the Republicans are talking about and they don't say what those changes are. So it's hard for the insurance companies to know how to plan for what will eventually happen. And what that means is you might have 30 days, you might have less before the subsidies expire and everybody starts losing their insurance. And then January 1st, higher premiums take effect. So right now, what the insurance companies are doing, they're just saying, we're just going to go with the higher premiums and see what happens. And then so people are going to open up their email and say, yep, nope, no more insurance for me. And then you're like, okay, well, I'm not on the ACA. Why does that bother me? Well, for one, if you're not on the ACA and you're getting like, employee insurance, don't think that when people get sick and don't have insurance, they're still not going to go to the emergency room, that they're still not going to get health care. They're just not going to be able to pay for it. So who is going to pay for it? People with insurance. And what's that going to mean? That's going to mean that your insurance rates go up for your employer. And what that's going to mean is that when your insurance rates go up for your employer, kiss your Christmas bonus goodbye, kiss your pay raises goodbye. It's going to affect you on the back end one way or another. It doesn't matter if you're on ACA. ACA helps everybody because it just makes the pool of money for people that are receiving the same health care larger. Another thing it does is ACA helps with preventive care. So, if I have health care, if I have insurance, I have, my blood pressure medicine covered. And if I don't, that means I can't even afford the doctor to prescribe the blood pressure medicine. And the blood pressure medicine is like astronomically expensive because my insurance is paying for part of that. That means my chances of getting a stroke or having a heart attack go higher, which means my chances of going to an emergency room go up, which means that I'm going to have that happen, and then I'm not going to be able to pay for my visit, which means you are. So it doesn't matter whether or not you have ACA, you are still affected by this. So now there's this leverage question. And this is, I think the Republicans want to frame this as, well, just pass the clean bill and let's talk about it later. So why won't the Democrats do that? What's preventing Republicans from negotiating now? Let's just think about that. Why not? Why can't you negotiate now? Trump negotiated for 1 hour with the Democrats, and that was apparently not even a negotiation. House Republicans have been in recess for weeks, since before the shutdown even started. The Senate's sending members home for 4 days. They could be negotiating right now. There is nothing at all that says Republicans can't negotiate. What's happening is the Republicans won't negotiate. And so then what the Democrats are saying is, well, if you're not going to negotiate now, why would you why should we believe you're going to negotiate later? So the Republicans are saying there's still plenty of time until December 31st. There's not, because December 31st is the deadline for when the subsidies end. That is not like, oh, if we do it on midnight of December 31st, that does not give the insurance companies time to like react to that. And they say negotiations will take weeks. Then why do we want to delay weeks to start them? If it's going to take weeks, start having them now. We'll discuss it after reopening. Why should we believe you? The government was open before it shut down and you wouldn't negotiate it, but you won't. Why do you have to wait until the last minute? Why can't you do it now? We want a clean CR first. No, what you want is the Democrats to lose all of their leverage. And what I mean by leverage is right now they could come together. Like, let's say they went ahead and just gave the Republicans what they want in this clean CR. And so then they make a clean bill to extend the credits or to extend the supplements. And then Trump vetoes it. Right now, the Republicans or the Democrats have the only leverage they have over Trump vetoing it is the shutdown. Because Trump hates the ACA and he will not extend it He will not sign any bill that extends the subsidies unless he is just compelled to. And you need this kind of leverage to do it. And the Republicans are saying, while they're saying we can negotiate it later, they're also saying we can't even guarantee we'll have the votes. Many want subsidies to die entirely. A lot of Republicans are on that, have been on this for a long time. They talk about dramatic changes to the ACA, but won't say what it is. And then they say Trump will be key to the outcome. So if Trump doesn't approve the plan, they're not going to vote for it, and Trump's never going to approve the plan. So they're just asking the Democrats to be idiots. They're asking the Democrats to pick tails on a weighted coin where it's going to come up heads. So the Democrats' concerns are broken trust. Trump already froze billions in congressionally appropriated spending. If you trust that, if you trust what they say, I've got a bridge to sell you, Representative DeLorean. No leverage later. Republicans control the White House, House and Senate, and the Supreme Court. Once Dems reopen government, they have no bargaining power. November 1st matters. Even if subsidies are extended in December, the damage is done if consumers see high premiums in November, and no guarantee of outcome. So it's not as simple as a clean bill. The clean bill, like just a clean bill, is a dirty bill. That's all you can say about it. So I think I won't read through that. So any comments yet? Nope, still no comments. All right. So now let's go ahead and take a look at the other half of this that I wanted to talk about today, which is this whole political violence thing. And you've got Stephen the Vant Miller prattling on and about left-wing violence. You've got Donald Trump talking about it. You got Caroline Leavitt talking about it. And there, you would think if like there's just this rash of left-wing violence, and they're using this one report of it's a CSIS report, and it marks the first time in 30 years that left-wing attacks outnumber right-wing attacks. But there's a fallacy called a small sample size fallacy. And for example, there are Aaron Gordon of the Denver Nuggets. I think it's in Denver. I think it's Denver. Anyway, he scored 50 points in the season opener. So if you were to say he's on pace to average 50 points this season and break the NBA record for scoring in a season by, like a mile, that would be a fallacy because it's only on one game. He could score 20, it's just one game, but it's the only game. So he is averaging that. And so you can manipulate numbers that are really small. If he scores 25 points the next game, then you could say that the defense held him to half his, season scoring average. So what a great job they did, even though they gave up 20. It's just small numbers. And I point out basketball because when I used to write about basketball a lot, this is something that used to annoy me. Like I'd see all these writers talking about paces and on pace to do this after like 1-2 weeks. Oh, his 3-point shooting is up, to 45% compared to 33% last year. It's what did he do in the offseason? And it's like you would check and he would, have like shot 25 3-point attempts, and so it's very easy to manipulate small numbers, and that's what's going on with a lot of this report, especially when you can fudge what some of those numbers are. And so I'm going to go into that and explain what is going on here. They are saying 5 left-wing attacks versus 1 right-wing attack. That's what they're basing everything on, that we need to investigate George Soros and every left wing. And by left wing, they mean everybody that's not MAGA. They need to investigate all these people for various, like being terrorists. They talk about terrorist cells. Like one of the attacks was the Dallas ICE facility. And, and they used the word cell as though they were some smaller part of a larger planning operation. But a cell of what? What kind of cell? And, they didn't kill anybody. To be real, they did try to kill somebody, and somebody did get shot. And so I'm not trying to justify that attack or calling it not a terrorist attack. I'm saying it's an isolated incident. It's not a pattern. It's not, emblematic of, like George Soros didn't fund it. It has nothing to do with the No Kings movement. It has nothing to do with the Democratic Party. They weren't radicalized by George Soros. They were people that took an extreme position based on Trump's anti-immigration policies and his mass deportation policies. And so they reacted to that. If anybody radicalized them, it was Stephen Miller and Donald Trump. I think that's one thing that people kind of lose sight of, is maybe sometimes the people that radicalized some of these groups are the ones who are radical themselves. You've got these, fat, what was the word? Athletic allergy, I think was one of that some of these some of these ICE agents are just have an athletic allergy. And that was like used by some of the people that were doing the training or something. Like, you can take the seal out of the gravy, but you can't take the gravy out of the seal. Like, once you are so just dumpy and fat and lumpy, you're not going to become like this pristine fighting figure overnight. But, he's sitting there, you got Pete Kegsbreath sitting there yelling at all the, senior military officials saying, oh, we've got people running around being fat. Yeah, you've got people that look like they ate other people joining ICE and getting paid $50,000 a year. Can't run a 50-yard dash. Can't even jog a 50-yard dash. And getting, outrun by, kids and old ladies and whatnot. Some of these guys have to special order their belts. Like, you're talking, like, some of these people do not look like they should be doing anything at all physical. So anyway, I digress. Some of the reaction is a reaction to an extremist action. And that is a lot of what is going on with the whole ICE thing. And they embellish numbers, and they lie, and they obfuscate, and they use statistics to say things that aren't true. So this CSIS report is technically, it's done by an independent, nonpartisan group that has been doing this kind of stuff for years, but they have a nonprofit status, and they also have government funding, and it counts for about 25% of their funding. So their ability to stay open depends on the president wanting them to stay open, especially this one. This one is saying things that he's already got a history and a present. Shouldn't even just say history. Right now, he's like trying to go after these any nonprofit group that doesn't abide by MAGAism. So, excuse me if I'm not like just going to accept that the CSIS report isn't, the messenger talking to the king. So anyway, they say there's 5 left-wing attacks and 1 right-wing attack this year. The 5 left-wing attacks have not resulted in any deaths, and the 2 right-wing attacks have resulted in 2 deaths. The left-wing attacks include things, I think, like the Tesla firings, and they don't include the Charlie Kirk attack, even though that's the one that the Trump administration wants to pretend is like the big one. And they don't include the right-wing attacks. Includes the guy that shot the representative in Minnesota, the two Democrats in Minnesota. But it doesn't include the attack on Josh Shapiro. So you can argue that at least one attack is missing here. And I think it's also important that there is no deaths here. These are mostly attacks on property, not on people. It does include the shooting, the attack on the ICE facility in Dallas, where they're, like they did try to kill people. But I'm not identifying with that attack. I'm not trying to defend all the left-wing attacks or bombing the Tesla things. I'm saying that these are independent people and groups that are acting on their own, and they're not funded by the Democratic parties, and that all 7 million people that are involved in the opposition to Donald Trump necessarily agree with all 5 of these left-wing attacks or the Charlie Kirk murder. Any more than I'm saying that every single MAGA agrees with trying to murder Josh Shapiro or murder the Democrats in Minnesota. Like, let's stop trying to universalize every left-wing or right-wing attack as being emblematic of everybody in that movement or everybody that disagrees with you, because that does not help us at all. All right. So what we have, if you look at going back further than a year, because like I said, there's a small sample size bias here. And especially when you see this is the first time in like years since 2016 or whatever it was, where, oh wait, I think we'll see that here. Attacks over time. This is going back to 2016. These are left-wing attacks and these are right-wing attacks. All right. And so right-wing attacks have historically, for the last 30 years, been more prevalent than left-wing attacks. And so now you've got this one, instant where halfway through the year, depending on how you count them, there might be more left-wing attacks than right-wing attacks. And you're talking about 5 versus 1. So this is not the major issue. There was one in 2021 that, I think involved like 2,000 people storming the Capitol building. I think that one was more serious than somebody setting a car on fire. And so what happened in 2021 is when Joe Biden took office, the FBI actually ramped up, like if you go, let's look at this. Right-wing violence went up under Trump and then down under Biden. This is just why did it go down? Probably because a lot of the leaders in right-wing movements were involved on the attack on January 6th. And they were, like the kingpins were in jail. And now, as soon as they get out, you got one of them that's making threats to Hakeem Jeffries. You got another one that tried to kill Josh Shapiro. So let's back off the rhetoric that there's this huge, they're like, oh, it's up 80% more, 80% of the, attacks are left wing or whatever. Or they're up, what do they say? They're up 80%. So what does that mean? They went up from, so they're up 100%. They're up from 3, or they're up 40% or whatever it is. They went from 67%. They went from 3 to 5. That's what I mean when I say you can manipulate numbers and percentages and stuff like that to make things seem drastic when they're not drastic. It's just a manipulation of data and percentages. Especially with percentages, you can really, misrepresent things by using actual numbers, but using them dishonestly. So let's look at the funding claims. So the Trump administration is talking about, so Stephen Miller says there's an organized campaign of radical left terrorism. The fact is, the FBI has found no organizational connections in the Kirk case or other instances. There's no left-wing group that they can say is funding it. Like, they can claim it's funding it, but they can't confirm anything. It's just called lying. You know what? Stephen Miller is a liar. By the way, here's my Stephen Miller. Well, I've got a lot of Stephen Miller jokes. What's the first thing Stephen Miller does when he wakes up in the morning? Pushes open the lid. Okay. So structured, sophisticated, well-funded, and well-planned is Stephen Miller is acting like there is this, mastermind behind it all. There's an Osama bin Laden of the left that's, doing all of this stuff. And it's like somebody threw a Molotov cocktail at a Tesla that was parked. There's no plan. None of this is true. George Soros funding violence. Trump and Vance have both said that. Open Society Foundations denies allegations, calls them politically motivated attacks, and they're also anti-Semitic attacks. Blaming the Jews. Where have we heard that before? And we're going to get into that in a minute. Because this is straight from the Reichstag fire playbook. Reid Hoffman funding violence. This is Trump doing, I hear names. Maybe I hear about a guy named Reid Hoffman. It's like, that's not evidence. Like, oh, you just made something up and said you heard about it, so you don't have to actually claim responsibility for what you just said. I just heard that. That's his favorite thing. Well, I hear this, I hear that. Who told you that, Donald? The Ford Foundation is supporting terrorism. This is just a group that donates money to democracy and civil rights work. They're just using this as a broad smear to attack everyone on the left, everybody who funds any kind of opposition. This is fascism. And Antifa, as an organized terror group, it literally saying, if you're against fascism, you're a terrorist. Again, straight from the Nazi playbook. And I'm not using that hyperbolically. And I'll get into it in a second. So George Soros, we all know who he is. Reid Hoffman is the co-founder and Democratic donor, or he's the LinkedIn co-founder and a Democratic donor. He funded E. Jean Carroll's lawsuit against Trump. So I think we know why Trump is worried about Reid Hoffman. The Ford Foundation is one of the nation's largest philanthropists, funds social justice incentives. Southern Poverty Law Center is a civil rights organization that reported on Kirk's disparaging comments. And Antifa is a decentralized anti-fascist movement with no leadership, membership, or organization. So these are the people that they're saying is involved in all of this. And there's nothing, any FBI, and the FBI has actually tried to find stuff. We're not talking about some liberal hero that is running the FBI right now. We're talking about Kash Patel. So they're like trying to find evidence that the liberals are funding some massive terrorist operation, and they can't find it because it doesn't exist. There is nothing there. You can look as hard as you want to find something that doesn't exist, and you will never find it. So what have they actually found? The CIS analysis, unlike foreign terrorist organizations with centralized leadership and funding, left-wing terrorists operate as loosely affiliated networks or lone individuals. And that's what they found. The 10 people, or was it 10 or 11 that attacked the Dallas facility, they're just 10 or 11 people that were connected to each other. Nothing outside of that. There's never been any connection with the Tyler Robinson and any left-wing groups. The historical pattern is right-wing extremists account for 75 to 80% of terrorism since 2001, not left-wing violence. And I would also like to point out that the next largest group is jihadists. Jihadists are also religious right-wing extremists. They're just a different religion. Same Kool-Aid, different flavor. Legal experts proving any foundation-funded violence would be very hard. No evidence exists. So the administration designated Antifa, which is not an organization, as a domestic terrorist organization. It's almost like just saying Antifa is a terrorist organization makes Antifa suddenly become an organization. They ordered DOJ to investigate Open Society foundations for material support of terrorism, which is apparently funding any democratic cause. And we're going to get into this in a minute because if you follow me on Blue Sky or Twitter, I talk a lot about the Reichstag fire. This is why. This is the Reichstag fire playbook. They directed the IRS to revoke tax-exempt status of suspected groups, which is why I point out CSIS has a tax-exempt status. They created all of government effort to dismantle left-wing terrorism. And, the problem with this is when you start chasing these phantom terrorist groups and you're devoting all of the federal government's attention to doing this, the real people, the real terrorists, aren't getting monitored. Like nothing. You're so busy trying to find something that doesn't exist, you're ignoring what does exist. There's been a joint FBI Joint Terrorism Task Force deployed to investigate progressive nonprofits. And they've threatened, this was my favorite. They threatened RICO charges against philanthropies and donors. Like, they're just trying to make it illegal to disagree with Donald Trump. So now let's go into the Charlie Kirk case. Okay. So Charlie Kirk was shot and killed at Utah Valley University during outdoor campus events, a single bullet to the neck from the rooftop position 120 meters away. I know there's some questions about Tyler Robinson people have. I'm not going to go into that because let's just say that it is Tyler Robinson and just follow that thread to its end. Family member contacts authority after Robinson confessed or implied involvement. The father recognized him from FBI photos. And involved in the middle of that is his transgender girlfriend that also contacted the FBI to say, I know who that is. But so that happened. And then Tyler Robinson went to his dad, told him what happened. His dad talked him into turning himself in. So then so he surrendered, and he had this little Discord chat with his friends when some people believe and some people don't. Uh, and there was like this, he wrote a confession and then burned it for some reason. I don't know why you would write a confession and then burn it, but then they did like one of those pencil engravings on the sheet behind it, and basically they were able to determine from that that there is a confession, but there's nothing alleging motive. Like, he has not said why he did it. Everything is inferred. And there's, one group of people that want that feels like, well, he was trying to shoot his trans, it's over the transgender comments, and he was this mega left wing, or he was this left wing guy that was just trying to defend, transgender rights and or whatever. And then, he got corrupted. He was brought up a good MAGA boy that got corrupted when he got hoodwinked by this transgender woman, and and she, like turned him into this radical. Or I don't know what their weirdo talking points are. There's also this other thing where, like, he apparently listened to Nick Fuentes, and Nick Fuentes likes trans women because he's so straight, he's gay, or I don't know, all of that stuff. I do know that the bullet etchings have to do with a gaming culture and with Nick Fuentes, and not necessarily, like, I think that, like, they can be spun ironically. And so there's there's a word for these kind of weirdos. I can't remember what it is. Um uh anyway, hi Kitty. Um can't think of it. Anyway, so some people think he could have just gone even further to the right. His mom said that he started to have, like these he started to turn liberal or something because of this trans girlfriend. But you can have a trans girlfriend or be trans and still be a MAGA. Like, just ask Caitlyn Jenner. So anyway, a little bit about Tyler Robinson. He's 22. He's from Utah. He was an electrical apprentice. Which, by the way, wasn't, I think that's what Abreu Garcia was. So anyway, he got an ACT score of 34. Apparently a pretty bright guy. His ACT score was in the 99th percentile. He was a pre-engineering major. He had a no criminal history. His dad was a registered Republican who posted pro-Trump content. His family said he became more political in recent years and leaned left, but apparently leaned left from MAGA. That, it was just basically because he had this trans girlfriend. That's takes a grain of salt. So the FBI investigation found no evidence connecting Robinson to any left-wing groups. The Discord investigation said no evidence he planned attack or promoted violence on the platform. Messages suggested lone actor. Yes, it was just me. One investigator stated every indication so far is that this was one guy who did one really bad thing because he found Kirk's ideology personally offensive and bullet casings engraved with anti-fascist messages, but no organizational ties. And I would like to also point out again that those anti-fascist messages were actually more like a gamer thing. And I don't know about all of that stuff, but apparently, there's like this kind of ironic thing with some games, and I don't know about all that culture because, like I don't get into gaming. So physical evidence. So yeah, I'm not, he, like, I'm not getting into the discussion about whether he did it. Because, let's just assume he did. So now let me explain what I mean by a Reichstag fire. If you don't know, the Reichstag fire was in 1933. The Reichstag, the German parliament, burned down. The Nazi government blamed communists and used the incident to justify the Reichstag fire decree, which suspended civil liberties and enabled the arrest of political opponents. Modern historians debate whether the Nazis deliberately set the fire, but it's clear they exploited it to consolidate power. And so it's that latter interpretation that right now that I want to look at. Is the Trump administration using isolated incidences of violence to justify a crackdown on legitimate political opposition? And so, like the poem, how does it go? Here, let me. The poem goes. The first state poem. Uh, First, they came for the communists, and I did not speak out because I was not a communist. Then they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak. There was no one left to speak out for me. That's the poem. Starts off, first they came for the communists. So when they start talking about the communists did this, which, has been actual rhetoric, it's very serious. When they say that this is all funded by George Soros, who is Jewish and a Holocaust survivor, or is he a Holocaust survivor, or is he? Let me look this up. I don't want to. He is a Jewish Holocaust survivor. So he is a Holocaust survivor, and you're accusing him of being a terrorist, right? Like, this is literally out of the Nazi playbook. George Soros was a victim of the Nazi rhetoric. Now he's a victim of Trump's rhetoric. Okay. And I've talked about this before, but in case, you haven't listened to every show I've ever done, there is a reason that this is an anti-Semitic slur. And that's because throughout European history, going back 2,000 years, they've blamed Jews for everything. Hitler didn't invent blaming the Jews. What happened is, historically, the Catholic Church made it illegal for Catholics to lend money. And the only people that were allowed to lend money were the Jews. And so the Jews would lend money, the Catholics would borrow it, and then they would get blamed for lending the money. They were the money lenders. They were running everything because they had all the money. And so then what would happen is, every time the crown started to need money, they would chase out all the Jews and then collect their debt. Okay, now you owe the crown this money. And so the Jews were kind of blamed for, having all the money and running the operation. This goes back thousands of years. Ever since the year 70 AD, when Titus ran the Jews out of Jerusalem. And so they dispersed to Europe and across North Africa. So there's no organizational evidence, despite FBI investigation. Zero evidence found or organized of funded networks. They're targeting mainstream institutions. They've named targets as legitimate philanthropies, Soros, the Ford Foundation, that fund democracy work. They're ignoring greater threats. They ignore the threat of right-wing violence, which, by the way, one reason that you might only have one count of right-wing violence is that you're ignoring the right-wing violence. One reason that right-wing violence may have come down under Biden is that he wasn't ignoring right-wing violence. He pardoned his own violent supporters. This notion that they want to make it sound like the 7 million people that marched on October 18th in the No Kings Parade, that was somehow violent, even though there was zero arrests of actual protesters. There was zero violence. They even picked up the trash. There wasn't even trash on the ground. Meanwhile, on January 6th, they beat 150 cops were injured. And they say, oh, none of them died. One of them did die. He just came back to life. They beat one to death, and he came back to life. But he was dead for like a minute. There's one that lost an eye. Two that were so traumatized they took their own lives within a week. That wasn't violent, but somehow 7 million people picking up after themselves, legally exercising their First Amendment rights was like terrorism. So there's unprecedented federal action. First, all of government domestic terrorism crackdown targets on one side that there hasn't even been any domestic terrorism. There's not even a law against domestic terrorism. How do you investigate what doesn't exist? They designate Antifa, which isn't an organization. And so if it's not an organization and it's not an aligned organization, you can just say anybody's part of the organization. George Soros is Antifa. I am Antifa. You're Antifa. Does that make you a terrorist? I'm not a terrorist. But this is why I go back to the poem. First, they came for the communists, right? First, they came for Antifa. They're punishing critics. They're revoking the nonprofit status of anybody that criticizes Trump. They're funding lawsuits against people that criticize Trump. They're trying to leverage people, the media, into forcing them to not cover Donald Trump, do negative Donald Trump coverage. Comedians can't even make Donald Trump jokes anymore. They're done. Due process is something that doesn't exist anymore, especially now that they can just claim you're a terrorist. They're already locking up people and sending them to other countries' prisons on the basis that they're, illegal immigrant terrorists, even ones that are here legal, even a citizen. There's 178 citizens that have been locked up and detained on because they're here illegally. How are you here illegally if you're a citizen? This is something that no president has ever done anything close to this. And I get tired of, well, can you imagine if Obama had done that? No, I can't imagine if Obama had done that, because Obama would not do that. Biden would not do that. Nobody has ever done anything close to this other than Donald Trump. He is an authoritarian. He is a fascist. So experts note similarities to these tactics used. Orban government cracked down on NGOs and Soros-funded organizations. That is exactly what Trump is doing. You don't have to, explain this. It's literally what he is doing. And he's using the Charlie Kirk assassination as his reason for doing it, which wasn't even a left-wing guy. It was a guy who just had a trans girlfriend. That's all we know about him. He was raised MAGA. He listened to Nick Fuentes, who is a Nazi, by the way, who had dinner with Trump at Mar-a-Lago. But somehow, it's George Soros's fault. Erdogan used terrorism accusations to jail journalists in opposition. How far away are we from that? I think there's a number of journalists that have been jailed based on their coverage of the ICE and these so-called attacks on ICE. You know, assaults are up 800%, and then it's like, oh well, he punched me in the fist with his chin. You know, you watch some of these so-called assaults. Oh well, you know, they suck the bullets out of my gun with their face or whatever. Like they're talking about people being assaulted by having their cars rammed by ICE. They assault people and then they accuse the people of assaulting them. So, like, let's take these comparisons between the Reichstag fire and the current situation. The Reichstag fire started with a single violent incident that was blamed on the communists. The current situation, the series of incidents, including Kirk, like these 5 so-called, you know, left-wing terrorist attacks. They blamed on communist left wings, blamed on radical left groups. In the Reichstag fire, they used it to suspend civil liberties. And in 2025, they're using it to threaten First Amendment rights, like the freedom of speech, like the freedom of press, like the freedom to protest. They in the Reichstag fire, they enabled arrest of political opponents, and they're targeting progressive philanthropies and donors. And don't forget that there's also this you know, prosecution of anybody that ever, you know, prosecuted Donald Trump. They're prosecuting their political enemies too. No evidence of an organized conspiracy in the Reichstag fire. No evidence of organized funding networks. They consolidated their Nazi power, and they're expanding their executive power over nonprofits. Nobody has exercised as much executive power as Trump did. He's ignored, I want to say 34% of court orders. He threatens Congress every time any Republican in Congress dares criticize him. He threatens them with primarying them. He's just subdued the Republicans in Congress into being his little yes men, his little minions. None of them have the courage, the backbone to stand up to him. He has just become a dictator in virtually every way. Name one thing that can stop him. And if you can't stop him, then he's a dictator. The democratic safeguards are still functioning to a point. And then, you know, it's like, these are some distinctions. You know, like there's still an independent judiciary committee, or independent judiciary. But, you know, if any judge disagrees with him, then, you know, they're a radical left judge, and they're talking about they need to get rid of all the radical left judges. Anybody that disagrees with him is a radical left judge. It's not ever, you know, like, what are the merits? Why did the judge say this? No, it's just, we are going to dismiss it out of hand because it's a radical left judge. There's free press reporting on administration actions to a point. And now you can't even report on the Pentagon unless you agree to give the Pentagon story, and only the Pentagon. They literally have to approve every story that comes out. You have civil liberties organizations like the ACLU and Mark Stein that are fighting back. And there's still the constitutional protections of free speech, but he's straining those. Like, I think sometimes we want to get into what can you still do and ignore that he's attacking those things. We just found out that this memo that went out, we need, every state has to come up with a National Guard plan to shut down protests. I'm sorry, riots. But riots, protests, the difference between a riot and a protest to the Republicans is a riot means that they're people that disagree with you, and a protest means they're people that agree with you. So that's why No King's Parade was a riot, and January 6th was a protest. Has nothing to do with violence. They picked up their trash in the No King's Parade, every single place. In the January 6th protest, they beat 150 cops and wiped their literal crap on the walls. But that was just a protest. So, who's being targeted? Progressive philanthropies, civil rights groups, Democratic donors, like we're getting to the point where it's just going to be illegal to donate money to a Democratic candidate. Environmental organizations, groups that criticize Trump or funded legal actions against him, and judges that ruled against him. Who's being ignored? The right-wing extremists, which killed 112 people since 2016. January 16, 6 attackers, which were all pardoned. Militia groups, which, by the way, in the Constitution, when it talks about a militia, it says that those militias have to be, like they're under the purview of Congress and the governor. So this idea of independent militia groups is unconstitutional. The Second Amendment talks about a militia, but that militia is to suppress insurrections, according to Article 1. It is not to protect your right to insurrect. And if it is, then where are you now? If you're there to protect us from government overreach and you've got government overreach, where are you now? The mechanism, they're taking away tax exempt status, RICO investigation. Trump even wanted to have a RICO investigation of people that criticized him in a restaurant. Terrorism designations, when there's not even a law against domestic terrorism, they're doing IRS audits, DOJ investigations. They're indicting people for doing their jobs. They're firing U.S. attorneys for doing their jobs. Their stated justification, ironically, is preventing political violence and terrorism. What they are doing is political violence and terrorism. And it's not just, they indict Adam Schiff or they indict, James Comey. You watch them. Well, if they're indicting U.S. senators and a former FBI and the Attorney General of New York, and they're indicting these people, what right do, how am I going to hold up? They're trying to go after the people that fund or that donate money to Democrats so that they can keep the 2026 elections. They're trying to gerrymander every state. Stop telling me that I can't say fascism when it's obviously fascism. So I think I won't go into that last part. Hi, Kitty. Okay. I hate brain farts. Sorry, I'm just reading through your. Yeah, riots are woke. Everything is woke. All I can say is if you're not woke, you're asleep. And if you're asleep, you don't know what's going on. So maybe just shut up and learn. Anyway, that's what I had planned for today. The shutdown is, you can either blame Sophie or you can blame the Nazis. That's my take on the shutdown. The Democrats are Sophie, and they're being forced to choose which kid, and so they're choosing the federal workers. That's who gets to go to the concentration camps. But that's not, the Democrats aren't the ones sending them there. The Nazis are the one that made them choose, right? Like, All you have to do is just say, hey, we can have a scenario where neither millions of people lose their health care, nor do we have to have troops not getting paid. Like both things can be true at the same time. The only ones that are forcing that to become a choice are the Republicans. So, whichever way that tips, it's the Republicans' fault. This is the Republican shutdown. They're the ones that are making the choice. They're the ones that are forcing Sophie to choose. And by forcing Sophie to choose, they're making it a choice. So, and then on the whole left-wing terrorism thing, it's a mirage. And it's a mirage invented to shut down democracy. It's a mirage to stop people from speaking, to stop people from protesting, to stop people from uh, being able to donate to any kind of opposition. It's a fraud. It's a fraud to prevent fair and free elections from happening in 2026 so they don't lose their power. Don't be deceived. Don't think it's anything other than that. It has nothing to do with left-wing terrorism because left-wing terrorism is not even a real thing. There might be instances where left-wing people performed individual acts of terrorism, but in terms of some sort of unified plot of terrorism, that's not happening. You want to talk about those things? Talk about the Proud Boys. Talk about the 3%ers. Talk about the people where right-wing extremism suddenly fell off the cliff when those people got locked up. And now, as soon as they get out, they're starting to try to kill Josh Shapiro and try to kill Hakeem Jeffries. So how about you just chill out on this left-wing terrorism stuff? Because it's about ending democracy. It's not about preserving it. What is this? MJ, apparently the Pentagon is using $130 million from an anonymous Trump friend to pay military family members. Oh, goodness gracious. I don't even know what to say about that. It's just the silliness just gets sillier. Oh no, I'm not blaming you. I just like I don't know if that's true or not. I don't know. Like in the moment, I don't even know if I like it's not a good thing. I'm somehow like not wanting my military beholden to some anonymous billionaire. Oh, I know you were. I was agreeing with you. It's insane. Right, right. Okay. Like I every once in a while you get weirdos on the YouTube comments, and you're obviously not one of them, but okay. And then we got RK here. You are so sweet calling it silliness. I call it complete and utter, you know, sorry, monetized. So I can't say that word, even though I agree with it, and probably, have a few epithets to throw in there. So anyway, thank you, MK and or MJ and RK for watching and commenting. It's always better when I have like some feedback going on, even if I don't read it while I am looking on another screen. So, will you get in trouble if I say it? I don't think I'll get in trouble for your comment. Um, it's anyway. So, thanks a lot for joining and watching today, and have a great weekend. And just remember, don't let stop you, and don't think that it just has to apply to you, because remember that it says it starts off first they came for the communists, but it ends up with and when they came for me. It's only a matter of time. If you're not fighting for trans people right now because you're not trans, if you're not fighting for gay people right now because you're not gay, and Obergefell's below gonna be reviewed by the Supreme Court again, if you're not fighting for women's rights to choose when they have to, whether they can whether they have to bring their rapist baby to birth and allow that rapist to be in her life for the rest of her life. If you're not fighting for her rights, if you're not fighting for um, the rights of people that disagree with you, then it's only a matter of time before you don't have any rights at all either. Either we all have rights or nobody has rights. So anyway, appreciate you guys for watching, and I will see you on Monday.